In a world consumed by the relentless glare of fame, where the truth often battles to be seen, a quiet defiance can shake the very foundations of expectation. This is the story of a night when a seemingly ordinary couple, thrust into an extraordinary spotlight, stunned an entire audience. When Hollywood icon Arnold Schwarzenegger, a titan of screen and politics, chose to mock Caroline Levit and her understated husband, Nicholas Riio, they didn't just respond. They ignited a spark of courage and integrity that resonated across America. This was more than a public spat. It was the precise moment a couple stepped out from the long shadow of prejudice and the unforgiving glare of stage lights, igniting a powerful, undeniable truth. Courage, honor, and integrity still hold immeasurable value in this increasingly noisy world. Before we dive deeper into the heart of this incredible tale, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of the powerful stories we share. Now, let the story unfold. Under the dazzling crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel in Washington, D.C., the annual charity gala for veterans draped itself in the predictable glamour typical of the nation's political and Hollywood elite. Stunning gowns flowed across the polished marble floors, tailored tuxedos accentuated powerful shoulders, and the air buzzed with polite handshakes and courteous smiles. Yet, beneath this polished veneer, a simmering current of political tension was palpable. Every glance seemed to carry hidden intent, every murmured conversation a hint of unspoken alliances or rivalries. This was a gathering of power, influence, and carefully constructed images, all converging to honor those who had served, but with an undercurrent that suggested other battles were also being fought. Attention, however, quickly shifted to the grand entrance as Caroline Levit appeared, a striking figure in a form-fitting navy gown that highlighted her poised demeanor. A silver cross necklace, bold and unapologetic, gleamed at her throat. She stepped into the ceremonial air like a sharp, refreshing breeze, cutting through the stifling formality. The youngest ever White House press secretary, known for her unwavering loyalty to President Donald Trump, Caroline knew instinctively that she was not a comfortable guest in the eyes of many present. Yet, she was there for a reason, far simpler and more profound than politics, to support veterans, people she had always held in the deepest respect. Beside her walked Nicholas Riio, her husband. A real estate entrepreneur from New Hampshire, Nicholas was unaccustomed to the blinding glare of the Washington spotlight. He opted for a simple, impeccably tailored black suit, his face calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the swirling intensity around them. Few in that room, engrossed in their own self-importance, knew the quiet man by Caroline's side had once known the biting cold of homelessness in his youth and had built an impressive career, brick by painstaking brick. From absolutely nothing, whispers like a subtle ripple began to spread through the crowd. Who's that? He doesn't look like a politician. Curiosity, tinged with undisguised skepticism, was clear on many faces. As the buzz hadn't yet settled, a familiar, booming presence took the stage. Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, a cinematic icon and seasoned politician, the evening's esteemed guest of honor. In a navy suit that hugged his still muscular frame, he flashed a wide, confident smile, a performance honed over decades. "Thank you all for being here to honor our heroes," he declared, his deep, distinctive voice resonating like a line from one of his blockbuster films. But then, a sharp, almost imperceptible glint passed in his eyes, aimed directly at the seats where Caroline Levit and Nicholas Riio sat. Caroline, seated below, felt an invisible pressure settle upon her. Her navy gown seemed to press in, her silver cross gleaming under the chandeliers. She glanced at Nicholas, who maintained his calm demeanor, his sharp brown eyes tracking Schwarzenegger with an unreadable intensity. "He's about to stir trouble," Caroline whispered, her voice low but pointed, the years of facing hostile press briefings a silent warning. Nicholas, in his simple black suit, lightly touched her hand, his touch a steady anchor. His voice, a low rumble, replied, "Let's see what he does. You know how to handle it." As a fiercely loyal White House spokesperson, Caroline was accustomed to facing attacks, but Schwarzenegger's gaze, the gaze of the moderate former governor who had sharply criticized Trump, carried a clear, undeniable challenge, as if he had chosen her, the very embodiment of the other side, as his personal target. Schwarzenegger began his speech, his voice booming, praising veterans with an almost performative grandeur. "We're here to honor those who defend freedom," he proclaimed, raising his hand, drawing enthusiastic applause from the audience. A veteran in the VIP section nodded, whispering, "He's got the spirit right." But then Schwarzenegger shifted, his smile turning sharp, a predatory glint in his eye. "And tonight, we have some political stars." He paused, his gaze locking onto Caroline. "Like Miss Caroline Levit, who turns every press briefing into a mega show." The crowd roared with laughter, some donors nodding in agreement, enjoying the public jab. But Caroline merely tilted her head, her hand gripping the edge of the tablecloth, her eyes ice cold. She instantly realized he was dragging her into the spotlight to mock, not just as a press secretary, but as a symbol of an entire movement he opposed. Then, with calculated cruelty, Schwarzenegger targeted Nicholas. His voice slowed, dripping with sarcasm. "And here's her husband, Mr. Nicholas Riio, a real estate guy. I bet he's here to sell some condos to Trump's fan base, right?" He smirked, tossing in a gratuitous Hollywood jab. "He's probably built a whole mega fortress, right?" The line, a thinly veiled jab at the conservative movement, sent the room into uproarious laughter. A group of businessmen in the front row clapped with glee. But in a far corner, a middle-aged veteran wearing a medal frowned, muttering, "That kind of joke at this gala? Out of place." Another veteran, with salt and pepper hair, shook his head, his eyes clouded with disappointment. Caroline felt anger flare like a flame. She looked at Nicholas, who sat perfectly still, but his eyes had darkened, and under the table, his hand clenched, knuckles white. "Ignore it," he said softly, his voice low but tense. Nicholas, who had once slept in a car just to pay for school, who had built a career from scratch, didn't need fame, but he stood proudly by Caroline. Schwarzenegger had just turned that arduous journey into a cheap punchline, and Caroline felt it like a knife to their shared pride. Schwarzenegger, fueled by the scattered, uneasy laughter that followed his cruel jest, pushed further, his voice laced with the theatrical villainy he mastered on screen. "Honestly," he chuckled loudly, pointing a finger directly at Nicholas, "I thought he was just Miss Levit's bag carrier." The room, still trying to process the brazenness of his attack, heard his voice, a mocking echo. "I mean, she's the star, and he's just tagging along, right?" A small-time businessman in the shadow of the mega diva. The laughter rang out again, but this time it thinned, lacking the earlier gusto. A group of veterans in the back exchanged uncomfortable looks, one muttering, "This is a charity gala, not a comedy stage." An older veteran, leaning heavily on a cane, stood silently and with eyes filled with profound disappointment, turned and left the room, his departure a silent, powerful rebuke. A prominent donor whispered to her companion, "He's gone too far." Caroline, her blood surging, felt a familiar, protective fire ignite within her. She started to rise again, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and fierce loyalty. Nicholas, sensing her rising anger, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady and resolute. "Let me," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, but imbued with a quiet authority that Caroline rarely heard from him in public. She looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes, a wave of trusting warmth washing over her. She nodded, sinking back into her chair, knowing that her rock, her steadfast husband, was about to step into the fray. Nicholas stood, his tall frame elegant in the simple black suit, moved with a quiet purpose toward the stage. Each step echoed on the polished wooden floor, a silent, defiant declaration that resonated through the suddenly hushed room. Tension, thick and palpable, gripped the air. Laura Bennett, the flustered MC and a seasoned veteran journalist, rushed from the wings, her expression a mix of alarm and confusion. She tried to intervene. "Mr. Riio, you're not on the list." But Nicholas's determined look stopped her cold. A quick-thinking tech crew member, sensing the charged moment, immediately handed him a microphone. Schwarzenegger, still on the podium, raised an eyebrow, his confident smile wavering, replaced by a glint of caution in his eyes. "Oh, Mr. Riio wants in on this too?" he asked, his tone still dripping with mockery, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Nicholas didn't rush to face Schwarzenegger. He stood center stage, the harsh spotlight hitting him like a pinnacle of challenge, but he met it with unwavering calm. His voice rang out, deep and unyielding, commanding the room to listen, every word a deliberate, powerful salvo. "I'm not Here chasing fame, he began, his tone measured, each word striking with quiet force. I don't need lights or anyone's admiration. But when Mr. Schwarzenegger turns the years I fought and sacrificed, the days of having absolutely nothing, into a joke for his amusement, I can't just sit there. The room was so silent, you could practically hear people breathing. An older veteran, clutching a medal to his chest, looked at Nicholas with profound admiration, his eyes reflecting deep empathy. Nicholas continued, his voice steady, each word like a blade piercing the audience's hearts. Caroline doesn't need my protection. She's stronger than anyone here, stronger than those standing on this stage. But she, and people like us, deserve respect, not cheap jokes from someone who thinks fame gives them the right to tear others down. He paused, took a deep breath, and then turned directly to Schwarzenegger, his eyes sharp, not with anger, but with a cold, unflinching honesty. You may be a hero in action movies, Mr. Schwarzenegger, but here tonight, you're just a man who's forgotten the true meaning of honor. You can mock, but you have no right to insult those who've sacrificed their lives to defend these very values. Applause erupted like a powerful wave, building into cheers louder than when Caroline had spoken. Veterans, from young medal wearers to elderly cane users, rose to their feet, forming a fierce wave of support. A woman in the VIP section, her eyes teary, whispered to her friend, "That's a real man." Laura Bennett, in the wings, her hand over her mouth, couldn't hide her emotion, swept up in the powerful moment. Schwarzenegger, for the first time that night, completely lost his confident air. He opened his mouth to speak, but the audience's unrelenting applause drowned him out, forcing him to step back. His fists clenched, but his eyes betrayed confusion and a distinct lack of pride. Nicholas said no more. He set the microphone down, turned, and walked off the stage, his gaze as calm as before, while the room echoed with an unrelenting ovation. As he returned to their seat, Caroline quickly grabbed his hand, her eyes brimming with pride. "You did it," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Nicholas gave a faint smile, replying, "I just said what needed saying," but in that profound moment, both knew this fight didn't just change them. It marked a turning point, a milestone. For those who dare to stand for truth and honor against the currents of celebrity and power, Laura Bennett, trying to restore order, took the stage. "Thank you, Mr. Riio, for sharing," she said, her voice still wavering with emotion. She turned to Schwarzenegger, her eyes questioning, "Do you have anything to add?" But Schwarzenegger, with a forced smile, shook his head, waving his hand to yield the stage. He stepped down, his peer team in the wings hurriedly pulling him backstage, whispering tensely. An aide muttered, "This is a peer nightmare." Schwarzenegger, his eyes darkening, said only, "They want a war. I'll show them." In the room, the air remained electric. A young veteran approached Caroline and Nicholas's table, shaking Nicholas's hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Those words were for all of us." A donor who had initially laughed with Schwarzenegger now whispered to a friend, "I was wrong to laugh. That man has guts." Caroline, looking at Nicholas, felt a new strength solidify between them, not just love, but a shared resolve to face any challenge. On social media, the media storm exploded. A journalist at the gala texted their editor, "This is front page news. Riio just made Arnold a laughingstock." A freelance reporter posted, "Nicholas Riio didn't just defend his wife, he defended the gala's values." Posts spread rapidly, featuring slow-motion videos of Nicholas staring down Schwarzenegger, his eyes conveying, "You've lost." One user wrote, "Caroline's fire, Nicholas's rock." Arnold had no chance. Another meme paired Nicholas's image with the caption, "When you don't need muscles to take down the Terminator." The room, still aglow with chandeliers, simmered with unease. The veterans' charity gala continued, but the air crackled as if everyone awaited the next blow in an unforeseen battle. Caroline, Levit and Nicholas sat close, hands still clasped, their eyes scanning the crowd for signs of what might come. The veterans' charity gala continued, but the air remained charged, thick with the residue of confrontation. Laura Bennett, the host, moved to the next segment, her voice calm but tinged with an unavoidable awkwardness as she introduced the charity auction for veterans. Yet the audience's true focus remained not on the glittering items up for bid, but on Schwarzenegger, who had retreated to a corner table, surrounded by his tense, anxious peer team. His polished exterior masked a brewing storm. His jaw clenched, he leaned toward the head of his peer team, a sharp woman in a tailored blazer, her face a mask of controlled panic. "This isn't over," he muttered, his thick Austrian accent laced with cold resolve. "They think they can humiliate me? I've faced worse." The woman nodded, her fingers flying across her phone, already contacting a crisis management firm. Schwarzenegger's team knew the stakes. Viral clips of Caroline and Nicholas were dominating social media, rapidly eroding his carefully crafted image, transforming him from admired icon to public antagonist. By midnight, in a luxurious hotel suite high above the glittering city lights, Schwarzenegger sat at a mahogany table, the urban sprawl glinting through the window like scattered diamonds. His legal team worked feverishly, drafting a cease and desist letter. It was a thinly veiled threat, accusing Caroline and Nicholas of making defamatory statements that had caused irreparable harm to his hard-won reputation. The letter, strategically sent to Caroline's White House office and deliberately leaked to select media outlets, dramatically claimed that their public attacks at the gala had distorted his character and true intent. Simultaneously, a coordinated social media campaign unfolded. Anonymous accounts, almost certainly tied to his peer firm, began pushing a new, insidious narrative with the hashtag #LevitLies, alleging that Caroline had exaggerated the entire incident purely to boost her political image and to cynically advance President Trump's agenda. One post, designed to sting, read, "Caroline Levit turned a harmless joke into drama to play the victim." Another more pointedly questioned, "Is Nicholas Riio really self-made, or just a prop for his wife's ambitions?" Caroline, back in the quiet sanctuary of their Washington, D.C. apartment, received the ominous letter the next morning. Early sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the stark words as she read. Her coffee, forgotten, grew cold beside her. Nicholas, brewing tea for them both, looked at her, his expression pensive. "What do they say?" he asked. Caroline slid the document across the table, her voice calm but her eyes icy. "They're calling us defamers. Schwarzenegger wants to play the lawsuit game." Nicholas frowned, skimming the official-looking document, then set it down. "He's scared," he said, his voice low but certain. "If he were truly confident, he wouldn't need to make this much noise." Caroline nodded, but her mind was already racing, a seasoned strategist preparing for battle. She had faced countless smear campaigns in the political arena. She was, in a way, born for this. Meanwhile, at a makeshift D.C. office, Schwarzenegger's peer team held an emergency meeting, their air thick with desperation. A young strategist, her hair in a high bun, suggested, "We need to push the narrative that Levit's using the gala for political PR. If the public believes she's just attention-seeking, we'll regain the upper hand." Schwarzenegger, at the head of the table, nodded slowly, but his eyes, for a moment, betrayed a flicker of doubt. "They're tougher than I thought," he admitted, his voice low. "She's not just a spokesperson. She's a warrior." Still, he approved the plan, and his team immediately began contacting friendly outlets, subtly sowing doubts about Caroline and Nicholas's motives. An article quickly appeared on a small, conservative news site, accusing Caroline of staging drama to bolster her standing in the Trump administration. Another questioned Nicholas's status as a self-made entrepreneur, implying he was just riding his wife's coattails, but Caroline Levit didn't sit idle, nor did she falter. She convened her media team at her White House office, her eyes blazing with determined fire as she laid out a counter-strategy. "Schwarzenegger wants to play dirty," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the anxious hum of the room. "We'll beat him with the truth." With a decisive movement, she pulled a file from a secure safe, documents meticulously preserved from 2009, from the very era when Schwarzenegger was California's governor. They detailed his decision to cancel funding for a vital veterans job training program, citing vague budget constraints, but internal emails, highlighted for impact, revealed the true cynical reason. The decision was made to avoid any perceived TIs to a conservative organization. "He didn't just mock us," Caroline told her team, her voice hardening with conviction. "He turned his back on the very people he claims to support." Her plan was bold, decisive. She chose to appear on Tucker Green's primetime show on Fox News to reveal the damning documents to the world. In the brightly lit studio, Caroline sat poised and resolute in a navy suit, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Schwarzenegger calls my husband and me defamers, she began, her voice calm but cutting, a sharp blade honed by experience. But here's the truth, in 2009, he cancelled a veteran support program because it didn't fit his political image. She held up the file, the camera zooming in on the highlighted emails, undeniable proof. This isn't hearsay. This is his signature, his decision. He has no standing to mock people like my husband who always put honor above fame, the studio. Audience erupted in spontaneous applause. Tucker Green, typically hard-edged and cynical, nodded in approval, a rare sign of genuine admiration. You just dropped a bomb, he said, his eyes glinting. The interview went viral instantly. Social media exploded with thousands of posts sharing images of the documents. A veteran posted, "I was in that 2009 program. Schwarzenegger abandoned us. Caroline's right." Another user wrote, "Arnold thinks he can sue Caroline? She just exposed him as a liar." A viral meme, swift and devastating, paired Schwarzenegger's image with the caption, "I'll be back, but not for the veterans." The public reaction was a tsunami, a wave of indignation sweeping across the nation. Veterans organizations, from the VFW to the American Legion, issued statements supporting Caroline, calling for Schwarzenegger to apologize. A group of young veterans held a small press conference, sharing personal stories of disappointment and hardship directly linked to Schwarzenegger's 2009 decision. "We lost jobs because of him," one stated, his voice raw. Caroline's the only one who dared to speak the truth. Schwarzenegger, in the opulent confines of his hotel suite, watched the interview unfold on the television screen, his face darkening with each passing word from Caroline. His usually unflappable peer team was in disarray, a palpable tension filling the room. A young aide, pale and flustered, whispered, "We didn't know she had those documents." Another strategist, attempting to salvage the situation, suggested, "We could say the emails were misrepresented, that they were taken out of context." But Schwarzenegger, his jaw set in a rigid line, raised a hand, cutting them off with a chilling finality. "Enough," he growled, his voice low but brimming with raw anger. "They want the truth? I'll give them a different story. I'm not easily defeated." He ordered his peer team to relentlessly ramp up the social media campaign, explicitly instructing them to spread insidious rumors that Caroline's documents were forged, a desperate attempt to undermine the undeniable evidence. Yet, the effort quickly fizzled. Independent journalists, spurred by the viral sensation, swiftly verified the email's authenticity, exposing Schwarzenegger's counter-narrative as a transparent lie. The public, now fully engaged, saw through the desperate ploy. Caroline and Nicholas, back in the familiar comfort of their apartment, sat close on the sofa, watching the news coverage, a quiet satisfaction in their shared gaze. Nicholas looked at her, his eyes a mix of pride and a lingering concern. "You've made him the center of attention," he said, his voice soft, almost a murmur against the drone of the television. Caroline smiled faintly, but her eyes, sharp and intelligent, remained serious. "This isn't over," she said, her voice resolute. "He'll hit back, and we have to be ready." Nicholas nodded, squeezing her hand tighter, the physical connection. A silent vow. "Together, we're unstoppable," he said, his voice low but firm, a shared conviction echoing in the quiet room. The next morning, gentle sunlight filtered through the curtains of their Washington, D.C. apartment. The TV in the living room droned on, replaying Caroline's devastating Fox News interview, the segment where she had exposed Schwarzenegger's callous 2009 decision to cut veterans' funding. Caroline's phone screen glowed with hundreds of notifications, a deluge of fervent support and comments mocking Schwarzenegger. Yet Caroline, scrolling through posts, didn't smile. She knew this victory, though profound, was temporary. "He's too quiet," she observed to Nicholas, who was pouring coffee, his expression pensive. "Too quiet for too long," Nicholas echoed, setting a mug before her and sitting across the table. "He's waiting for an opening," he said, his voice low but certain. "But you hit him where it hurts. Now he has to be careful." Caroline nodded, her eyes remaining sharp, as if anticipating her opponent's every calculated move. She knew Schwarzenegger, with his formidable professional PR team and vast media network, wouldn't retreat easily. The initial lawsuit letter and the #Levit Lies campaign, though overshadowed, still simmered in the background, and some smaller, more compliant outlets continued to question her motives. But what Caroline didn't expect, what no one truly anticipated, was the sudden, powerful wave of unexpected support coming from the most unlikely corners. In Los Angeles, in a sunlit, sprawling office, Sylvester Stallone, the undisputed action legend and Schwarzenegger's old friend and cinematic rival, sat before a computer screen. He scrolled through posts on the X platform, rewatching Caroline's interview, his brow furrowed as he read the comments criticizing Schwarzenegger. Stallone, who rarely spoke on political matters, recalled the camaraderie of working with Schwarzenegger on The Expendables, but he also valued truth and integrity above all else. After a moment of profound reflection, Stallone opened social media and with a decisive click, typed a short, impactful post. "I've known Arnold for years, but Caroline Levit is right. Veterans deserve respect, not abandonment for politics. Truth matters more than fame." The online community exploded. Stallone's fans, from hardened action movie buffs to staunch conservatives, shared the post like a batlicry, amplifying its reach exponentially. One user wrote, "Stallone just threw a Rambo punch at Arnold." A viral meme, swift and devastating, paired Stallone and Karoline with the caption, "When Rocky backs Meghan, veterans organizations, already steadfastly supporting Karoline, grew even bolder, their voices amplified." A Veterans of Foreign Wars leader posted, "Thank you, Stallone, for standing with the truth. Caroline Levit is our voice." Stallone's support, coming from a cultural icon not directly tied to Trump, provided an undeniable boost to Caroline's credibility, pushing the story far beyond partisan lines and into the mainstream consciousness. But Stallone wasn't the only unexpected ally. In New York, Meghan McCain, the conservative commentator and formidable daughter of the late Senator John McCain, went live on her popular podcast. With an emotional, unwavering voice, she praised Caroline and Nicholas. "I don't agree with all of Trump's policies," she declared, her voice resonating with conviction, "but Caroline Levit and her husband did what many wouldn't dare, face a Hollywood giant and tell the truth. Schwarzenegger should apologize, not sue." The podcast segment was widely quoted, further bolstering Caroline's position. One user commented, "Meghan McCain and Stallone backing Karoline? Arnold's out of moves." A young veteran posted, "Caroline's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for us." Support didn't just come from celebrities. At a Virginia coffee shop, a group of veterans gathered, rewatching Caroline's interview, their faces etched with newfound hope. One, a participant in the very program Schwarzenegger had cancelled in 2009, emailed her directly. "Miss Levit," he wrote, his voice trembling with gratitude in his message, "thank you for saying what we couldn't. We're behind you." This email, along with hundreds of similar messages from across the nation, was shared by Caroline's media team with the powerful caption, "This is why we fight." These raw, personal messages struck a deep chord with the public, transforming Caroline and Nicholas into symbols of ordinary people daring to challenge entrenched power and winning. Meanwhile, Schwarzenegger, isolated in his hotel suite, felt the mounting, suffocating pressure. He sat before a TV screen, watching news replays of Stallone's post and McCain's podcast. His peer team, now in utter chaos, argued fiercely amongst themselves. A young aide, desperate, suggested, "We could have Arnold do a public charity event, something big to calm the public." But a seasoned strategist, grim-faced, shook her head slowly. "Too late," she said, defeat in her voice. Levitz framed him as a betrayer of veterans. Schwarzenegger, joining via Zoom, sat rigidly, his face contorted. "I don't want to look like a loser," he growled, his voice low, almost a whisper. But his eyes, for the first time in his illustrious career, showed resignation. He felt powerless. His team knew every single move now was fraught with insurmountable risk. Washington, D.C., the city of neon lights and power plays, reflected its glow through the hotel window where Arnold Schwarzenegger sat quietly in his lavish suite. No frenetic PR team surrounded him now, no desperate strategists arguing over spin. Just an open laptop displaying the relentless news cycle, dominated by the story of Caroline Levit and Nicholas Riio. Sylvester Stallone's unexpected social media post, Meghan McCain's impassioned praise, and the flood of heartfelt veteran stories had transformed the gala incident into an unmanageable media whirlwind. Schwarzenegger, his eyes dim, lacking their usual arrogance, slowly closed the laptop. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that he was losing control. Meanwhile, at Caroline and Nicholas's apartment, a soft, warm light from a table lamp illuminated the dining area where they sat, a quiet moment of reflection. As they watched the evening news, a clip from a veterans' press conference, powerful and poignant, played on TV, overtly supporting Caroline. Caroline, in a simple sweater, held Nicholas's hand, her eyes a complex mix of resolve and fatigue. From the relentless fight, "We've backed him into a corner," she said, her voice low but steady, a strategist acknowledging a turning point. Nicholas, in an unbuttoned shirt, leaned toward her, his voice certain, "But he won't apologize publicly. He's too proud." Caroline nodded, her eyes glinting with understanding. "Then we'll make him stay silent." In a dimly lit Los Angeles office, blue light from computer screens illuminated the tense, drawn faces of Schwarzenegger's PR team during an emergency meeting. A strategist with graying hair, worn down by the losing battle, spoke up, his voice tinged with defeat. "We can't win by continually attacking Levit. She's got Stallone, McCain, and the entire veteran community. Public opinion is overwhelmingly against us." A young aide, still clinging to a desperate hope, suggested, "Maybe a charity video with Arnold and veterans? Something to calm the public?" But the Ledpier executive, shaking her head slowly, replied, "It'll look fake." Levitz framed him as a hypocrite. "The public won't buy it." Schwarzenegger, joining via Zoom, sat rigidly, his face contorted. "I don't want to look like a loser," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, but his eyes showed a profound resignation. For the first time in his formidable career, he felt utterly powerless. The next morning, a brief, stark statement appeared on Schwarzenegger's official social media account. There was no video, no image, just stark text. "I've always supported veterans and apologize if any past actions caused misunderstanding. Let's focus on helping our heroes." The post was conspicuously devoid of any mention of Caroline or Nicholas, nor did it explicitly acknowledge the damning 2009 documents. Yet, the public understood. It was an undeniable retreat. Caroline, in her White House office, received the news from an aide. She read Schwarzenegger's post on her phone, her eyes not triumphant, but focused, already planning the next step. "He won't go further," she said, her voice calm, a battle-hardened general assessing the field. "But we're not done." She ordered her media team to amplify the narrative, highlighting the unwavering support from veterans and powerful allies, like Stallone. A new post from her official account appeared. "Thank you to the veterans, Stallone, McCain, and everyone who stood for truth. This isn't my victory, but that of those who deserve respect." The post garnered thousands upon thousands of shares, quickly accumulating comments like, "Caroline's a queen. Nicholas and her are icons." The public reaction was a tsunami, cementing their heroic status. Evening news broadcasts, from Fox News to CNN, ran triumphant headlines about Schwarzenegger's undeniable retreat. A CBS commentator eloquently stated, "Caroline Levit and Nicholas Riio did the unthinkable. They forced a Hollywood icon to bow without a single lawsuit." An independent journalist's article resonated across platforms. "They didn't just defeat Arnold. They reminded us that truth outweighs fame." Veterans organizations continued their outpouring of support, with a Virginia group inviting Caroline and Nicholas to speak at an upcoming conference. A young veteran wrote, his words heartfelt, "Caroline and Nicholas give us hope. They fought for us." In their apartment, Caroline and Nicholas sat by the fireplace, its flickering light illuminating their faces. Nicholas, holding a mug of tea, looked at her, his eyes gentle but resolute. "You've changed how people see us," he said, his voice warm and low, filled with quiet admiration. Caroline, curled up in a blanket, smiled faintly. "No, you did," she corrected softly. "You took the stage. You spoke the truth." She paused, her gaze distant, contemplative. "But I think he won't stop completely. He's just waiting for another chance." Nicholas nodded, taking her hand. "And we'll be ready." "Like always," he said, his voice firm, a shared commitment forged in the fire of their struggle. Schwarzenegger, alone in his sprawling Los Angeles mansion, watched the news. The TV played a segment about Caroline, detailing her triumphant rise. But he turned it off abruptly, his eyes empty, stripped of their usual fire. His once impenetrable PR team had unraveled, some resigning under the unbearable pressure. A former aide texted him, "We can't beat Levit. She's too smart." Schwarzenegger didn't reply. He stood, gazing out the window at the distant horizon, a solitary figure against the vast cityscape. He knew, with a certainty that was heavier than any weight he'd ever lifted, that he'd lost, not for lack of strength, but because Caroline and Nicholas had something he couldn't buy: integrity. On social media, the story continued to spread, a living testament to their victory. A user posted, "Caroline and Nicholas didn't just take down Arnold. They showed on a Still Matters." A new meme appeared, an instant classic, featuring the couple with the caption, "When you fight Levit and Riio, you lose before you start." A freelance journalist wrote, "This isn't just Hollywood drama. It's a lesson in standing up for what's right." Veterans posts flooded in, heartfelt and direct, one writing, "Caroline and Nicholas are our voice. Thank you for not giving up." The sunset bathed the grassy fields around the Richmond, Virginia Community Center in gold, where hundreds of veterans and their families gathered for a special ceremony honoring truth. The event, held to celebrate those who speak out for veterans' honor, became a focal point after Caroline Levit and Nicholas Riio's decisive victory over Arnold Schwarzenegger. The atmosphere brimmed with raw emotion, with American flags gently waving and stories of courage whispered among the seats. Caroline and Nicholas entered, greeted not by polite handshakes, but with tight hugs and heartfelt thanks. Caroline, in a long navy coat, her hair neatly tied back, stood beside Nicholas, who wore a white shirt and light grey vest, his eyes calm but warm. An older veteran, holding a faded red beret, approached, shaking Nicholas's hand, his voice trembling with gratitude. "You made us proud," he said. Nicholas bowed his head in humble reply. "We just did what was right, sir." Caroline, watching the profound exchange, felt her heart warm. They hadn't just fought for their personal honor. They'd reignited faith in the veteran community. The organizers invited Caroline to deliver the keynote, an honor she accepted with profound gratitude. As she stepped onto the simple wooden podium, the last rays of sunset streamed through the window, casting a soft, golden glow around her. The room fell silent, only the gentle breeze audible outside. Caroline placed her hands on the podium, her eyes scanning the weathered faces of those who'd fought in wars and everyday battles. This wasn't a glitzy gala, no stage lights, no mocking laughter, but it was where she felt closest to the enduring values she and Nicholas had fiercely defended. "Ladies and gentlemen," Caroline began, her voice clear, sincere, like a friend speaking by a campfire, "I stand here not for fame, not for victory. I stand here for you who taught me that courage isn't found in the spotlight, but in standing up when truth is distorted." The room erupted in soft, understanding applause, a wave of empathy washing over them. She continued, her voice rising yet warm, "When Nicholas and I were mocked, we didn't respond out of pride. We responded because we knew what was true, and the truth, illuminated by courageous people like you, always prevails." And so, the story of Caroline and Nicholas, and their stand against a titan, reminds us all that authenticity and integrity are forces far more powerful than any celebrity or political machine. Their journey underscores that when ordinary people dare to speak truth to power, the world listens. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of courage in your own heart, please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss another story of honor, integrity, and unwavering courage.